But first, some introductions. I am Pramod Deshpande, Chief Coach of Jayanagar Jaguars. We are really lucky today to have with us uh, an expert in the field of fitness. So he's strength and conditioning manager of South Africa's national rugby team, but he's not new to India. He has been working with a lot of Indian athletes. So last year he was strength and conditioning coach for Chennai Super Kings. He works with weightlifters of India. Actually, he also working with the Khel Ratna awardee, the world champion Mirabai Chanu at this time, and many other champion weightlifters. Let's start. Hi, Sandile.
Yes, sir. Hi, how are you doing today, Coach?
I'm doing great. So, guys, this is
Excellent.
Sandile, and so Sandile, let me directly get into the obvious question first, right? Sandile, you work for athletes from various sports, team sports like football, rugby, cricket, and individual sports like weightlifting, rowing.
Mm.
The list is very, very long, and so all these sports have different physical capabilities and skill requirements. So how can you help athletes from so much various backgrounds? So that's something very interesting. Would like to know about that.
So, firstly, thank you for the opportunity for me to share my knowledge here. It is actually an honor and a privilege. In the times I've spent speaking to you, Coach, I really have appreciated the conversations we've had. So, thank you so much for the platform. So, the first question, obviously, is around me training people from different sporting codes. And I think the first thing we need to realize is that the human body is the human body. Whether it's a human body playing cricket, playing rugby, or playing football, it doesn't change.
Yeah.
The human body's biomechanical abilities, movement-wise, it's the same. You have to bend, you have to extend, you have to twist. And then obviously from a physiological point of view, the heart, the lungs, those things don't change. So the principles essentially stay the same. And essentially what we look at is, from my side, I try and work on athletic ability and athlete's athletic ability. And I look at the different components of physical performance. So to start off with, really, if we have to compartmentalize that, on some level, the body has to have a good ability to produce energy to perform. So when you're running, you use primarily your aerobic capacity and your aerobic energy systems to perform. When you're sprinting, it's more anaerobic. So really, in that instance, we look at what we call as energy system development, and we look at what things we can do to develop your different energy systems to perform. So whether you're running, whether you're doing a shot put, whether you're lifting a weight, it's how your body produces energy to do that. Then we'll look at strength, which is the ability either to push an implement, an ability to hit something with a tennis racket, so that ability essentially will look at strength. And your strength, we can look at explosive power, we can look at starting strength. So there's different ways which strength can be demonstrated. Then we look at mobility and stability, which is your joints, your muscles. You can look at it in terms of flexibility as such, but can your body move into the positions that you need to be able to perform movement? Then we look at speed, which is your ability to accelerate off the mark, your ability to run for 100 meters. Then other thing we look at, maybe more in ball sports, we look at agility and change of direction. So that we look at really as your components of your components of physical performance, or in other words, your athletic ability. So when you are training people, from my side at least, that should be the fundamentals that I work on. Once those are well developed, then we can look at specifics of the sport, because it doesn't help to be able to. So for example, Coach, you train runners, and you can imagine if a person runs a 10-kilometer race, they are within the last kilometer or last 500 meters of their 10-kilometer race. The person next to you is running ahead of you. For you to finish that last 500 meters, you literally have to sprint to get to the end, which means you must have an anaerobic, a well-developed anaerobic system to be able to outsprint that person at the end. So for me, it isn't a matter of having one system or one component of athletic performance which is focused on and not the others. So it's really about when you're working with different sports, you have to ensure that you have a complete athlete. You can't have an athlete who's very flexible but isn't strong. It doesn't make sense. You can't have someone who has got a good aerobic capacity, but anaerobic-wise, sprint-wise, they can't do that because you never know what the requirements. Because sports generally happens in a slightly uncontrolled environment. If your opponent is hitting hard, you can't hit softly. You have to hit harder. If your opponent is running fast, and for you to catch them and beat them, you have to run faster. So you have to have a well-balanced athlete. So for me, my approach for all sports is having well-balanced athletes.
Please explain what is this conditioning, right? And why it is required for any sport?
So the conditioning part really looks at what I spoke about before, which is the energy systems, which is your aerobic capacity and your anaerobic capacity. And all that is how does your body produce energy? We need energy to be able to produce force. And, so when you're running, you require primarily oxygen to help you to generate energy to be able to run for a long period of time. In the other instance, if you're sprinting, your body already within the muscle cells has what we call creatine phosphate, has essentially got energy enough to create what we call ATP, which is an energy source, which helps us to do that sprint. So your body within itself has got enough energy to do that without having to require oxygen from outside. So when you look at conditioning, it's really about looking at the physiological requirements of a sport. Meaning, if you're playing the game of football, what is the nature of football as such? Does that require for you to be able to run for a long time? Does it require you to have short, explosive bursts of energy? And once you understand that, which means you understand what kind of energy you need for the body to be able to play for 80 minutes or 90 minutes, depending on which sport that you're doing. So for example, if you look at cricket, for example, if you look at a T20 cricket match, when you're fielding, a fielder generally who's active will cover up to 6 kilometers within that game, moving backward and forward, chasing after the ball. So you need to have a good aerobic system to be able to cover that. And on some level, because there'll be sprints, you need to have a good anaerobic system to cover that. So conditioning is the preparation of your energy systems to be able to deliver what you need to perform at that level.
All of us, the endurance athlete, let me put it this way, kind of think that, strength is great. And it's like in your field, what you are helping weightlifters and rugby players, we can visually see why strength is important. But how important strength is for even endurance sports like, say, cycling, right? Or marathon running, where the activity is over longer period of time, and we feel that endurance is important. How important is strength? If you can highlight that will be great.
Yes. So I think it's really getting an understanding of what is strength, and people I think generally don't understand what strength is. Strength is thought of as just the ability to lift a heavy weight, which is not the case. It is on one hand, but it is the benefits of being able to do that that's more important. So in a sense, if you look at a runner, and I think maybe I'm going to speak briefly about the mechanics of running as such, but I don't want to make it too technical. But when you're running, you lift your leg up and you push it into the ground and you hit the ground and it propels you forward. So, I think it's Newton's third law. We say for every action, there's an equal but opposite reaction. So essentially, when you lift your leg up and you put it into the ground then pushes you forward. So the more force you're able to put in the ground, the more you're going to propel yourself forward. So strength has different components. One, it helps to improve performance, which means the stronger you are, you're likely to get faster because you're producing more force, which then propels you forward. Then the second one is going to be on the issue of injury prevention. Because when you're running, for example, I gather that when you run 5 kilometers, you essentially have 6,000 steps within 5 kilometers. So which means each leg will have 3,000 contacts and impacts with the ground. If you think about the tissues, if you think about your ligaments, you think about your tendons, you think about the muscles, which means that's 3,000 times that your body has pounded into the ground. So if you do that on a daily basis, 5 times a week, 6 times a week, the likelihood is that you're increasing the chances of injury because you're doing it. So if you're strong and your body has the good ability to control itself, you can endure that kind of impact on your body, and therefore you can have an injury-free career. So being injured, being an athlete who's injured does no good for anyone, because then you can't perform your sport. Whether you're a cyclist, whether you're a runner, whether you're a tennis player, what good is a tennis player with an injured shoulder? Because then they can't serve and they can't play. And if you're injured, you can't compete. If you can't compete, then you can't go win competitions. Then you might as well just retire. So strength allows the body to be able to endure those forces. So if you think of hitting a tennis ball, you think you'd hit that tennis ball and the ball moves at a speed of like 180 kilometers per hour, whatever the case is. To be able to do that, you must produce lots of force. But if you do that with a shoulder which is weak, eventually you can injure yourself. So strength allows you to protect yourself from injury. And I think the last thing is realizing that if you're strong and you can perform and you're injury-free, that means there's longevity. You can perform sports for a long time. You can have many seasons. There's no point in being an athlete who gets to the top level of cricket or football for one season, then you get injured, then you're out. Then what's the point? As opposed to being an athlete who's strong, who recovers properly, who hydrates well, who's got good nutrition, who's strong and does all the right things, and you can have 10 years as an athlete, which is essentially what you want for everyone. From a running point of view, you want to be able to run for the rest of your life so you can enjoy the beauty of, you know, spending time in the sun, the fresh air, and just live a good quality life. But if you get injured, then you are not able to do that.
Let us discuss this, right?
Yes.
Rest and recovery, like the strength. Why is it required for all sports? How does it work?
Yes. So, I mean, recovery is such an important part of preparing for competition. It is as important, and I think even more important than the hard training itself, because once again, this is a human body. We're not a robot. I mean, even a car needs to go for service. You know, you drive for so many kilometers, you must go replace the tires, you must go replace the oil, the oil filters, everything. So even the human body every so often needs a rest and recovery. And essentially, for you to have an effective training process, you need to stress the body. So what training is? Training is a form of stimulus which stresses the body. Once the body is able to recover from that stress, it is then in a better position to cope with more stress. So the importance of recovery is that it allows the body to get stronger in terms of resting, recouping, and then allowing it to perform better the next day. And training, once, as we said, training is a process. You cannot wake up tomorrow and run 10 kilometers, the next day 10 kilometers, then think you can go run a half marathon. You need to take time to allow your body to develop. I mean, essentially, we look at the process of adaptation, saying you need about 6 weeks minimum, I'd say, for your body to start adapting. You know, if you've got more time, even better. But recovery really is about recovering from the stresses of training. And recovery needs to be looked at from a planning point of view, meaning if you have 7 days in a week, and depending on where you are with your training plan, beginning stages or further, at the beginning, you might have less frequency of training, and later you might have greater frequency of training, all based on your periodization and planning. But you have to have days where you have complete recovery. And generally, I'd say to start with, maybe 3 days of recovery, 2 to 3 days of recovery or complete rest might help. And rest meaning you are not doing anything active. You could be having an active recovery day, which is light loaded, maybe cycling off your feet as opposed to being on your feet. Then you might have complete recovery days where you're doing nothing. But recovery isn't only about being off your feet. Recovery is also about looking at the basic fundamentals. So meaning you are not training in terms of anything strenuous, but you're sleeping. Having your 8 hours of sleep goes a long way in allowing the body to rejuvenate and regenerate. The food you've consumed gets used properly in your body to rebuild the muscles that could possibly have been broken and damaged to build, to make them stronger. In terms of hydration, ensuring that you've got the right amount of electrolytes, the right amount of water in your body to allow it to recover. The body's ability to maintain muscle and the function of muscle is dependent on your muscle cells. We've got a process called apoptosis where muscle cells die. They need to be replaced by other muscle cells. The more you hydrate, the better situation you're in to maintain the gains that you've made. So there's nutrition, there's hydration, there's sleep. So all those things are important. And in this day and age, we've got problems with what we have: social media. People are on their phones. They've got a hard training day. They go home, they spend the whole night on their phones, and they only sleep 4 hours, which means they wake up the next morning actually not having completely recovered, which means it's a problem going forward. So those are small things you need to worry about, but recovery is of absolute importance. And when you finish having a race, it's important to take time to allow the body to recover, because you have a buildup of some kind of metabolic waste as such in your body, which needs to be cleared up and allow you to start fresh. Usually when you go for weeks of running and your legs start feeling like lead and you cannot run anymore, you know that the body is telling you something. Your body is giving you a sign to rest. And essentially recovery helps us to avoid what we call overtraining, when the body essentially cannot continue to progress without taking some time out. And the problem with overtraining is once you end up overtrained, properly overtrained from a medical point of view, then you're essentially out of action for weeks and you can't train, which then sets you back.
Fitness regime, right? Like let's say I'm doing CrossFit or I'm doing Zumba. Is the training load concept also applies there?
Yes. So training load essentially has to do with the amount of work that you do. The load doesn't mean the weight of the dumbbell in and of itself. It means how much work are you doing and can your body cope with that amount of work that you're doing. And training load, what we usually do is we monitor training load with this internal ways and external. So internal meaning obviously your body letting you know how you feel. And, you know, we look at heart rate and that kind of thing, and you can measure through heart rate. You can measure through, also we have what we call athlete monitoring systems, where we look at how you feel, your well-being. Are you sleeping okay? How are you feeling? Are your muscles feeling sore? So there's different things that you can monitor to determine. Then externally, we can have things like GPS tracking, where you can see how much work you're doing and how your body is responding to that. And that can help us to monitor your training load. And essentially, as I mentioned before, it'll help you to stay within the right range to help you to recover more effectively and to get optimal outcomes or optimal benefits from the training that you're doing. So training load is an important part. So training load could be looking at from a cricket point of view. You can have a bowler, a pace bowler, who maybe trains 3 days a week and has one match a week. And if at practice is in the net and he's bowling 10 overs, which is 3 days a week, which is 40 overs is bowling on the match, he might bowl another 10 overs. So maybe let's say 40 or 50 overs is bowling, and he starts feeling that he's got a niggling shoulder injury or whatever the case is, or some pain or discomfort. If we reduce the amount of bowling, so instead of doing 10 overs per training session, he's only doing 6 or 8 overs, then you find that he copes better with that. That's the way we can monitor training load and help him to reduce the risk of injury.
I say is those people who are attending this session mostly are from what is the internet brackets them into, recreational athletes. But
yes,
if you see now, the way all of the cycling, triathlons, running, etc. are developing,
yes,
these all recreational athletes are kind of moving towards being a competitive athlete. What do they look at, which are the areas, right? If they are looking to get into competition, what are the areas they look into and how they prepare for a competition?
I think, so my experience of being in India and working with athletes there. So obviously I've worked with professional athletes. You had mentioned before I worked with Chennai Super Kings. So with them, in fact, I was supporting their preseason training. So I wasn't the strength and conditioning coach, but I was supporting the system. But my support came in the form of understanding what they're doing. And at that level, obviously, you have a structured manner of looking at how the athletes perform because they know what to do. Then on the other hand, you have a situation where you have people who are novice, who want to get better and want to know how to get better. I think the most important thing I realized with Indian athletes is that the training age, so the culture of physical activity or the culture of training or the culture of spending time in the gym was not there before. It's something which I think is developing over time. Even the culture of road running in India has increased quite a lot than before. So for me, the big thing is for them to succeed and go to a point where they can be competitive is understanding what the requirements are for that sport in order to become better, number one. Knowledge is key in this instance. A lot of people will just decide. I saw an ad. Someone sent me some ad from India right now saying someone is preparing a race. There's some competition where people are running 1,000 kilometers. 1,000 kilometers. Everyone sees that and everyone wants to run. The first race is 250 kilometers. So for me, it's a matter of understanding what running is and also understanding the preparation for that. Once you know what the requirements are and once you know what your capabilities are, then you can go forward. And as I mentioned before, the different areas I looked at energy systems, looked at strength, looked at mobility and stability. So those things, you need to have a plan in terms of how you're going to improve them to help you to go forward. Once you're able to put something into place, and then slowly but surely, as we've said, it's a process, you will improve to get better. Without that plan, it becomes difficult to then achieve what you want to. If you're able to achieve without a proper plan, the likelihood is that you won't be around for a long time because you might get injured. So for me, it's really about knowledge and understanding, and then finding someone who's an expert to support you. Every day now, you've got more and more personal trainers who are qualifying. You've got more and more sports scientists. India now has their first sports science qualification, which is offered at Ramachandra University, where you can actually go and find a sports scientist to support you. People are qualifying with strength and conditioning qualification. You can go and find someone who can support you with that. I know sometimes when I tell people about finding a trainer, they say, oh my God, how much is that? Then you think it's an investment. You know, coach, I want to go run a 21-kilometer race. I can go online and Google 21-kilometer training. But in fact, if I really want to look after myself and be in the best position to succeed and enjoy that, I must contact you, coach, because you're a coach. That's what you do. You're an expert in running. So I must come to you for that so you can help me. It's good to invest in knowledge and support, not just to go and do it on your own and think, okay, some people are lucky because they don't get injured. But most of us, we're just mere mortals. We get injured.
Now, you rightly pointed out the cycling, the running, and a lot of this fitness / competitive things are catching up in India. And as you
Yes.
see, many of those who are taking it now are in their late 30s.
Yes.
From scientific perspective, is there a limit for that?
None whatsoever. So, coach, what I've realized as well, and what science tells us, is that even once you're an older adult, 50s, 60s, your ability to improve strength, your ability to improve muscle mass is still there. You're still able to get stronger. You're still able to perform. I think of a gentleman who I started training. He came to me at the age of 72, and he just wanted to be healthy, and all he wanted was, in South Africa, we've got a cycle race called the Cape August, which I think is about 100 kilometers or so. At age 72, he said, all I want is once, I just want to be able to go and cycle this race with my son. If you can help me do that, Sunday, I'll be very happy. This gentleman, the first time he came to me, he could barely do a single lunge. And after a year, he could carry 30 kilograms with him and he could lunge across the room. And he was shocked. He could barely do a push-up. After a year, he could do 10 push-ups. So the body's ability to adapt and develop is, you know, the human body is amazing. But I think it can only be done with the right kind of support, the right kind of instruction. So generally, people want to do things on their own. You hear people who wake up one day and look in the mirror and see that they've gained weight at whatever age and think, oh my God, I've gained weight. I want to go for a run. On the first day, they want to run 10 kilometers. And they get themselves injured. So what we're really saying is the body is able to cope and develop, but you need to do it under guidance. And so coming to people like you, coach, is important.
One thing which I always wanted to understand, because we see, you know, Indian hockey team has now got a high performance coach, and all these IPL team has somebody as a high performance. All these football leagues, they have something called as high performance consultant, coach, and the designation changes, but high performance keeps on repeating. So I'm really curious, and I'm pretty sure everybody would be curious to know what is high performance. There is somebody doing strength and conditioning. There is a coach who is talking about skills, and then you get a consultant who looks at high performance. So how that works?
So, I mean, essentially, high performance looks at people who manage processes and systems that are required to perform at the highest level of the game. So, you know, and interestingly enough, the person who is the high performance coach or the trainer for the Indian hockey team for the men and women are two South Africans who, the one was actually a classmate of mine, Rob. Even Chennai Super Kings, the actual strength and conditioning coach who's been with them for the last 11 years, also a South African guy. And I think it's important as India that you realize it's important for people to start getting the qualifications, traveling abroad, coming back and sharing knowledge. So I'd like to see there being more high performance and strength and conditioning coaches in India to support that. But getting back to your question, I think it's really someone who understands the system that needs to be put in place to make sure that the athletes are performing at the highest level possible. So which means understanding that there are different components that need to be put together. You have your strength and conditioning. You have, so every element of sports science, strength and conditioning, you have a sports scientist, then you have a dietitian or nutritionist, then you have a sports psychologist, you've got a physiotherapist, and you've got a doctor. So it's really someone who understands how everything fits into place and how to use those people in an optimal way to help the team to continuously develop and go forward. And it's looking at how do you prepare for the season, what assessments are done. Once you have the assessment, how does that assessment speak to the planning and training programs which are put together? And how do we then review that so that we can actually improve? And it can happen on a weekly basis, monthly basis, quarterly basis, whatever the case is. But it's really someone who has an understanding. So we talk about high performance, meaning people performing at the highest level, international level. Because we know essentially the people you have playing for you are the best people you have in the country. And it's important to make sure that they are looked after as best as possible. As a coach, you can imagine if you're coaching a football team, 11 top players in the country, and if maybe you have someone who's training them, whether a coach or whether a strength and conditioning coach, who doesn't understand these things, then they train athletes. And as a football team, you have 6 people who have had hamstring injuries in the last season. The next season, if it continues, for all you know, you might have 8 people, which means now you've got 8 people that are out who played for you last season. You must find 8 new people, which means as a coach, you cannot develop and go forward in your rankings or in your manner of playing. So essentially, it's understanding things so that there's a sustainable development and growth in the performance of your team.
So I would like to know your experience about training with Indian sports person, not only the likes of us, which are amateur or recreational, but the top level athletes.
Yes.
If you can shed some light, so people will come to you.
Yes. So interesting enough, the short time, the time I spent with Chennai Super Kings, I think I realized something. MS Dhoni is someone who's completely focused. He works hard. When he's on something, he does it, and he takes it extremely seriously. So it isn't surprising to see that he's as good as what he is. If you see him in the nets, the team goes out for a practice session at 5 o'clock and they get into the nets between 5 o'clock and they might leave there at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. He's in the nets completely the whole time. He'll have 8 bats on the side. He'll just keep on swapping, have a water break. So his skill levels, his focus is extremely very high level ability to focus and take things very seriously. I've worked with Bhavani Devi, who is India's #1 in saber fencing. Last year, she won the Commonwealth Fencing Championships in Australia, the first Indian to achieve such. Also very focused, but her life revolves around fencing. Every part of her life and existence revolves around fencing. So for me, there's a certain level of dedication to that and commitment to a sport, which I think you cannot compare. There's very few athletes I've actually found who have that much commitment and have made that much sacrifice. So now considering also as well, she's a female in sports in India. And I think if we look at it from a cultural point of view, being a young lady who now must leave home to go be elsewhere. So she sacrificed a lot. So for me, it's really learning about how badly this person wants it, her training commitment every single day. So very impressive in terms of that aspect. But also, it's also about people who've understood the environment they're in, maybe working with someone like Amit Mishra, who played a spin bowler for India as well. Very lovely gentleman who, has been at the game for many years. He's in his 30s now, but someone who I think likes to give and contribute as much as possible to people out there. Takes everything in its stride, very calm and composed. But even at a later stage in his life, even when he was riddled with many injuries, I think it would have been probably easier for him just to stop and give up and not continue. But towards the end of his career, I think maybe even 2-3 years back, having had a really possibly a career-ending injury, and where he could have bowed out, very honorably, he decided no, he's going to work at it, and barely being able to, bend over and touch his toes, but to come back and be able to play at the level, be able to be a wicket taker at IPL. So for me, I've really enjoyed seeing that with some of the athletes in India. And I think maybe one of the reasons why I realized was, even in the institution I worked at, I think culturally, when it's time to work, I think Indian people work. I look at specifically at looking at people from an academic point of view, where you have youngsters who will study literally for 12 hours on end. They'll bring their lunch and everything whilst they're studying, they're eating. And I know from a cultural point of view, when kids grow up, when they're studying for exams, the parents are sitting there feeding them whilst they're studying. So they don't take. So that commitment for me, I think, is really amazing. And, I think I've been very privileged to travel and work, in different places in the world. But the one thing I've definitely learned whilst being in India is the level of commitment. Once people commit to something, but I think it's just the part of getting started, because I think there's no culture of fitness.
Yep.
And that aspect, I think when it picks up, people will do it, to its end. I have another friend and an athlete who I trained, a young lady who is a doctor, who's Dr. Erica Patel, who, literally, I think she finished the Berlin Marathon last year. She's running maybe for 2-3 years. But even though she's a doctor who's doing her PhD, but every day without fail, she goes for a run, without fail, even to a point where she ended up completing the Berlin Marathon. So that level of commitment for me is really, was interesting to see.
How and why you choose to be in this profession of strength conditioning? And
okay, all right. So actually, by profession or by qualification, I'm what you call a biokineticist, which is essentially someone who is an exercise specialist. So strength and conditioning is one component of what I do. But the other component is really prescribing exercise for medical purposes. So really just an exercise expert. Where can we use exercise to improve people's quality of life from a health point of view, general well-being point of view, but where can we use exercise as well to enhance performance? And at school, being someone who was always interested in the human body, I wanted to go and study medicine. And there's a professional team here in South Africa called Kaizer Chiefs, which is popular. It's like our Man United of South Africa, very popular team. And, whilst watching football matches every weekend, whenever someone would get injured on the field and they fall down, someone would run on with the bag, and then they'd take some water or something and put it on them. And the player would jump up and they'd be ready to go. And I thought, geez, I want to do that with my life. I want to become that. And then he referred me to a lady who was a biokineticist at the time, a lady called Karen Green. So I went to her practice and I thought, I don't want to do this. This is like a second-rate thing. I'm not interested. And whilst I was sitting there with her having a discussion, at the time, there was a South African tennis player called Wayne Ferreira. I don't know if you remember him.
Yeah.
He even played at Wimbledon. Yeah. Yes. And Wayne Ferreira walked into the room, and this lady said, Wayne Ferreira is here for an assessment. He's injured his leg. She put him into what we call an isokinetic testing machine, where it's like a computerized chair where it's got different arms where you test your strength. And this gentleman sat down and she said, listen, grab the strap, pull this side, pull that side. So I was getting involved in this assessment of this great tennis player who's one of the only South African who I knew who had played at Wimbledon. And he was talking to me, chatting, and strapped him in. Then he did his test, and then she showed these fancy graphs of his results. You're strong here, you're weak here, and this and that. And immediately I was like, wow. My first day, I got to meet the top tennis player. I got to assess him. I got to learn that there's a science behind this thing. The very next day, I went to the university close to where I stay. I went and applied, and I got in. And that was it. And I've enjoyed my career. I've enjoyed, being a part of working with sports teams, traveling. But more than anything else, the part I enjoy is really helping people to be better. If you help someone to move better, you can help someone to feel better. If you can help someone to feel better, you can actually help someone to perform better. So it's really about helping people to be a better version of themselves. Through training, when you start to train, you have a goal. To achieve that goal, it can't be the same you that's going to achieve that goal. It has to be a better form of you. Because if you were lazy before, you didn't run, but now you run every day, that's a better version of you. It has to be.
So the last question actually for you, kind of putting you in a spot, because you train people, and
Yes.
that's two great stars, and you spend a lot of time with teams, right?
Yes.
So you train from so many. So what is your own favorite sport? So what is your favorite sport? I said, yeah.
No, I'm joking. It's not difficult. I love running.
Wow, great.
And not because I'm speaking to you, but running is my opportunity to get away from everything and just be on my own. And more than anything else, in running, I like running on the road, but I love trail running even more. I love running up in the mountain with the trees and just nature. So that's my favorite thing to do. If I get an opportunity to, fortunately living in Cape Town, we have Table Mountain right over here. There are a lot of trails that you can go on, 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers. So that's really my favorite.
Sandile, thank you very much for chatting with me about this, and some of the things I wanted to put on table, which coming from an expert like you is it highlights why that is important. And your vast experience of working with so many sports just came through your discussion. And I'm pretty sure you are currently, how you are doing you are helping people through video sessions, etc.
Yes. I mean, from my side, you can see some of the work I do on Facebook. My Facebook page is called Peak Athletic Performance, or just check my name, Sandile Sibeko. On Instagram, my handle is Sandile Sibeko. But on that, what I do is I try to let people know. Right now I'm working, because of COVID, I'm doing online training. I have an online app where people get to contact me. We have an assessment online and a discussion over our Zoom calls. I do an initial assessment, and from there I prescribe a training program and I help people. So at the moment, as we say, I'm working with Mira, working with Satish Shivalingam, so working even Bhavani Devi. It's really online at the moment. And since we've started, since March, even seeing some of the results we've had, I think initially Bhavani was probably doing about 30 push-ups at the time, and to be able to do almost 50 push-ups right now. But this we've achieved through addressing some issues which are injury related, and then now that she's pain-free, being able to push herself to a point where she can do almost 50 push-ups. Till today, I have not met an Indian female athlete that can do 50 push-ups. So if she can do it, I guarantee you that everyone can do it. So really, if anyone is looking for any help out there, please check me out on Facebook or Instagram. And I'm more than happy to share whatever I know. As I said to Coach before, that I have been privileged and lucky to have so many different experiences, and I really want to go out there and share what I know with everyone else. I can only help so many people, but if I help Coach can help even more people. Coach, so it's really being able to help.
And of course, thanks to Procam for having this session, and considering Procam's reach, I get a message goes out to the larger audience that any sport you pick up, you have to spend some amount of initial time to build your foundations. And
Yes.
thanks for this. And with this note, I guess we can conclude. Thank you very much, Sandile. Thank you very much, Procam, for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you, Coach, and thank you to Procam for giving me this opportunity to engage with you and get to learn about your space and what you do as well. And I hope to see you soon when the travel becomes possible between different countries. I hope to see you next time when I'm in India.
Thank
All
you.
the best. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.